So now I've got to clean up and resurrect this aquarium, and I'll go through the process with you of exactly how I do that. So first of all, the reason why this is very noisy is because the sump, which is that area there, is completely dry. There's no water in there at all. So therefore the pump is having trouble pumping water up because there's not enough water in there to pump up, and it's making that nasty sound. So when I clean that up, then the sound should quieten right down and add some water. Now with a job like this, when it's a big overhaul job, sometimes the best thing to do is just kill all the power. Because if you go unplugging everything individually, then there's a chance that you forget to plug a plug back in, and not plugging a plug back in can be a major problem. So it's quite good to just start, unplug everything, do what you need to do, and then plug it all back in so you can't miss any plugs. Also making sure the plugs are labelled with what's on the pump, what pump or filter is on it, is a really good idea, and we'll try and give this a bit of a clean up. Now normally water tests is the very first and most important thing I'll do when servicing an aquarium like this, but because this one's been quite a while and since it's been serviced, I'm not going to bother testing the water because I'm going to do a very large water change. And if I'm just replacing a lot of the water, there's no point testing it before when you can clearly see that it needs attention. So the first thing I'm going to do is use this gravel cleaner. The gravel cleaner can go into the gravel and suck all the dirt up out of the gravel. And I'm going to start removing a lot of this water. I'm going to remove over 50% of this water. Because with a job like this, a large water change is like a reboot. Now, due to holidays and COVID, this tank is obviously needs a lot of attention. But to rehash a tank like this, it's not like you can come and service it once and just expect it to be okay. It takes a series of services. It'd be good to do a full service, like 4 weeks in a row, to have any attempt of getting this tank back on track. And you expect a good month to get this back to any state of okay, and 3 months to really be back on track. That's just how it works. Let it go for 3 months, then you need to spend 3 months of super attention to get it back. Nothing happens overnight. Now, as a tank evaporates, the salt will concentrate. So in this case, the sump was completely dry, and the salt level was 0.029, so that's high enough to kill fish and potentially even coral. So over time, it's really important, as the water evaporates, you need to be able to put fresh water in, otherwise your salt level goes up and up and up. Now, dropping your salt is no problem because fish can handle salt going down, but fish can't handle salt going up. So you need to be very careful when increasing your salt, but you can drop salt fairly confidently, because when you drop salt, you ease osmotic pressure. When you increase salt, you increase osmotic pressure, and if you increase osmotic pressure, then you'll take energy out of the immune system, and that's a major problem to the fish. Now, when you're doing a major overhaul like this, you really don't want to do too much. So this tank hasn't been serviced in a while, so what we're going to do is clean all this sand up, and then next time we come back, then we'll move the rocks and clean the sand underneath the rocks. You don't want to change too much water. You don't want to agitate too much, otherwise you can create stress on the fish. And one other risk you've got, particularly with tanks that have not been maintained properly, is when you do move the rocks or the sand, you can discharge hydrogen sulfide that can be poisonous. So make sure you put some polyfilter in the filter every time you do a major clean, and because that will reduce any risk of hydrogen sulfide poisoning. Now, a lot of electrical equipment, including lights and skimmers, will have air filters, and it's really important that they maintain clean, because if they get covered with dust, then it can cause the unit to overheat, which can be a simple and expensive mistake. Very common with chillers and various types of lights. So when you're giving the tank a clean, give your lights a clean, Keep your air filters clean and make sure that everything can function as it needs to. Now, if you're going to do a reboot or super big water change, it's really important that the new water that's going into the tank is the right temperature. So doing a big reboot, like over 50%, is much safer in summer, because if you do it in winter and you put cold water in, then you risk losing your stock. The other thing is, if you're doing a job like this and you've got the right amount of water to do a water change, it's really a good idea just to keep one bucket of water that you've got out of the tank aside, because for some reason, when you're doing a big tank service like this, it's not unusual that sometimes you end up with not enough water at the end. So just having that spare water ready to go often means that for some reason you never need it, but then every now and then you get yourself in a situation where you've run out of water, and it's sometimes producing more salt water is either impossible or impractical. So the next thing I'm going to do is clean up all the algae in the strainers on the pumps, in the strainers of the filter, clean the glass lids, clean all the inside of the tank. There's various things you can clean with. There's things like algae magnets. If you're going to use an algae magnet, I prefer the ones with the razor blades on them. They're really good. There are sponges like that I'll often use. Makes the job relatively quick. But ultimately, having a good old razor blade on a stick is about the best thing you can have, because a razor blade on a stick will just cut through all of the algae very efficiently and quickly. And then over time, if your razor blade's getting old, you can just clip it out and put a new razor blade in. And as you can see, this can very quickly and efficiently clean all the algae off. Now, after you do a big service, it's really good not to feed your fish for a few days, because a lot of fish, like rabbit fish and tangs and blennies, they'll love eating all this algae, but you definitely want to get a fine net and scoop this algae out. Normally I will clean the glass before I remove the water, but I didn't want to do this in this case because I wanted to be able to see. Now, if you do have an aquarium with a sump in the back, don't forget every now and then to put a siphon pipe down and suck all the crap at the bottom, because you can be absolutely surprised how much crap builds up in the bottom of that weir, and it's very easy to forget about it. So don't forget to do that every now and then. So now it's time to refill the tank. When you're doing these service jobs, it's always worth bringing more salt water and RO than you think you need, because it's surprising how often you actually need more. Every time you're filling an aquarium with a sump, it's really important that you've got to have the door open and you've got to see the sump, because it's really easy to keep filling the aquarium because it will not overfill. It will only fill up to the point that makes it go down, and then the water level actually becomes down there, so you need to be able to see it. It's surprisingly easy to chuck an extra drum in, flood your tank. Now, one thing I've never really understood is why companies produce aquariums where the top-up system is right in the back there. So it's pretty much impossible to put water in without devising some fancy siphon. You really need to have a top-up system, so it's really easy to just tip the water straight into the top-up, because a top-up's supposed to make your life easy, not make your life hard. Now, over time, particularly with the cheaper aquariums, you do find that the hinges rust out, because obviously in an environment like that it's very harsh, so therefore rust is a massive issue. So every now and then, swapping out the hinges will give the cabinet a little bit more life. But salt water and steel, salt water and timber, salt water doesn't really like anything, it destroys everything. Now, one thing that is very, very important is surface agitation. Now, this aquarium here, you can see, has very, very good surface agitation. Making sure your surfaces are well broken is one of the most important things for an aquarium, full stop. The surface agitation gives you your gas exchange, increases your redox potential. Very, very important. It's a very humid, hot day today, and I keep cleaning this front glass, and the humidity keeps on frosting it over again. The fun of living in Australia. So bloody hot. In a perfect world, if we wanted to keep corals, we'd really want a chiller on this tank. So we'd put a chiller here and that would keep the temperature down. Because on a hot day like this, temperature is definitely a problem, particularly for corals. So now I have replaced the polyfilter. I've given the skimmer a clean. I've given the sump a bit of a clean out. The tank is looking exactly how I'd expect it to look, which after a service like this, you'll find that it often looks worse than when we started. This system does have a dosing pump. Because I've been here for quite a while, I am not going to do that today, because today's been a bit of a major service, trying not to do everything at once. This system also has a top-up system down the back there. Once again, I'll try and engage that next time, trying not to spend too much time at once. Do a little bit and regularly to get the tank back on track, instead of spending hours and giving them a big bill. So the other thing is that all these fancy lights run on app conductivity. So it's really important that when we're here, we've got to have access occasionally to the person who has the app on their phone, because quite often I'll service these tanks and the owners are rarely ever here and nobody really knows who's got the app. So we don't really know how to change the light settings. So that's just something else to bear in mind. But I've now got to set the skimmer. Now you can see at the moment the skimmer's running a little bit low. So what I've got to do is just turn these gate valves closed a little bit. And if I close those gate valves a little bit, I need the froth level in the skimmer to raise. So let me just play with that. So see, it's coming up now. But we don't want it to raise too much. And when you set a skimmer, the key is really to change it a little bit and then come back. Then change it a little bit and then come back. Because it does take a while for these things to settle. And particularly with these really narrow coned skimmers, they're very sensitive. So you do have to be checking it fairly regularly if you want good performance out of your skimmer. But that's starting to skim now. When I got here, it wasn't skimming at all. But mind you, when I got here, the pump was also completely drained. Yes, plant, I know the feeling. Now, in order to fill up these very impractical top-up systems that are right in the back of the sump, what you basically have to do is I'll usually get a drum, put another drum on top of it. I'll put RO in that top drum, and then I'll use a siphon. I'll siphon down into the sump, put that over into the top-up in order to fill up the top-up system. Otherwise, you just can't get water back there. And you've really got to be watching because you will overflow it. It's very, very impractical. I'm not a fan of these top-ups. I'd rather have a drum next to the system or do something that's easy, not something that makes my life hard. Doing an overhaul like this, that the tank looks debatably worse when I leave than when I get here. Because the key is to do a series of improvements and not shock everything too much. Today I've done an absolute maximum clean. I've done a large water change with pre-prepared water at the right temperature. So I have done a large water change, I've done a large gravel clean, I've done a big tank clean. You can't clean it perfectly because you can't even see it half the time. I've given the skimmers a clean, I've replaced the poly filter, I've cleaned the filter. So we're all 500% better than it was. But then next time we come back, we've got to look at re-engaging the top-up system, getting the dosing system going again, and pursuing with regular maintenance. As I said, it's going to take several services to get this tank back on track. It is not the case that you can leave it for a few months, whether it be because of holidays, whether it be due to COVID, whether it be whatever. It's regular maintenance that keeps these tanks on track. It's not leave it for 6 months and magically fix it. So a couple of regular services, we can start getting some more stock back in here. At the moment there's a beautiful fox face there's a cardinal fish and some beautiful clownfish that, considering the filter wasn't even running, I think they're very tough. And hopefully it'll all be looking up for them now.